Hi students, well, we're in chapter 1, starting with the prehistoric period. And what I've done is, in this module, I've actually added a vocabulary list of visual art or visual art language that I think is important for you to use when you're describing these artifacts. What I did was I went through just a general list of words that we regularly use, and I selected those, a short list of those that I think are the most appropriate and relevant for you to apply when you're talking about artifacts. So the list is in Module 2. It's in a Word document, and I advise you to print it because it has the entire list. And so what I've done in the list is, in the table rather, I've highlighted in yellow those that you need to use in this chapter in Module 2. And then the next chapter you'll use more of them. And that way you can build on your vocabulary instead of learning a whole bunch of words that you wouldn't normally use. So what I wanted to do in this very short video was say, look, this is how you should be doing this. And especially for your first paper, when you're just going to take those slides from that first PowerPoint, and you're just going to take those from the slide list. It says exam slide list. You're going to use a vocabulary in a paragraph format and describe them. So let me just show you what I've done here, because on the next slide, I've shown you how we can apply that, and I'll go over some of the definitions. But before that, and this is one of your first images, the Paleolithic period, the caves of Lascaux, also called Halls of Bulls. And this is only actually part of a very large space that's deep, deep inside a cave. And later on, you'll know the reasons why that exists. So this is a very early work, and I'm going to call this an artifact. And so when you're looking at an artifact or a work of art, and when I say a work of art, I'm referring to significant works that are in galleries or that you have in museums. It's the same reason that you have artifacts in natural history museums or in art museums. You have Egyptian or Greek artifacts. Because these works do two things, and that's what it says. It says, well, how are artifacts significant, like fine art? Well, first of all, an artifact, let's say it's a painting or a sculpture or whatever, it can express an emotion or an idea. But equally, if not more important, is that it reflects the culture that exists in. That's very important. So all those Egyptian works, all those Sumerian works, all those Greek works, they're reflecting what that culture was about, what their belief system, why they made those objects. So that's why it's important to not only be able to know the title of them and the period, but also, to be able to describe them. Articulation and clarity is very important in language. It's important for you to make comparisons, as well as using the correct language to understand the differences and similarity in a much broader context, if you can articulate what you're describing or what you're seeing. So first of all, the sheet that you're going to print off has just general terms like 2D, 3D, etc. But then we have the elements of art and principles of design. Now, if I go to that last question, what are the three components of a work of art? They are all equally important: material, form, and content. I'm going to go from the back towards the front. Content is what the work is about, the meaning of the work. Notice I didn't say subject, content. So this image you have here, you do see a subject, you see animals, but you don't really know the purpose or the meaning of this. That would be the content. And then you have the word form, and form are your elements of art and principles of design that you will use to describe this and all the other artifacts. And then, of course, the material. You need to know what the material is because that's equally important. And in this case, it is this drawing on this cave wall is probably, you know, berries and charcoal, anything natural that they would find. Rocks, other rocks they break up and make, you know, iron or some kind of pigment oxide to draw with. So this is why you need to learn the vocabulary, and you're going to apply it, and I'm going to guide you through this, and you're just going to learn in sections. Each module, keep adding to your list. So this is the first list of general vocabulary and their definitions. And what I'm saying is anything highlighted in yellow is something that you would probably use in this module. Others, when I go forward, you'll see it's not highlighted. I'm saving those for the next module. So let me go over these very quickly. Form. When you say the form, you know, form has a lot of different meanings. The form of a letter. When we say form, we're meaning, you know, the overall what the elements of art and design have. The ultimate result of that, you know, the form. So it's sort of an obscure word, but it's used for a lot of different things, but you may hear me refer to it as the form. And of course, the subject, that's pretty simple. The subject is something we can identify. In this case, it is animals, running animals. It looks like bison and bulls and maybe some horses, whatever. So content is meaning in a work. You don't know the content yet. That's coming. And then you have words like two-dimensional and three-dimensional. Well, this is two-dimensional. We sometimes refer to that as 2D, and that is drawing and painting. And two-dimensional means there's height, width, and there's no real depth. All the depth is illusionary. In this case, it's on the side of a cave wall. There is some depth with the relief of that cave wall, that rock, which they also draw on, but these are basically two-dimensional works, I would say, versus three-dimensional, which is like sculpture or architecture. We call that 3D if we shorten three-dimensional. And that means that something has height, width, and real depth. Yeah, like sculpture. And then you have these words representational. Now, representational is the same thing as figurative, and it can be realistic. Wow, that work is realistic. So I'm looking at those bulls and I'm saying, well, that work is realistic, or that work is figurative, or that work is representational. All those words mean the same thing, that you, the artist, is creating something that references nature, and you can recognize that. Realism usually infers to something that's more real. This may appear cartoon-like to you, but the artist so many eons ago was trying to create this illusion of these animals running. And then you have the word abstract. Maybe you think this is abstract. I see it as more representational. And abstract means that, and sometimes the word non-representational is used, meaning that we're not really trying to make something realistic. But abstract can be a reference to nature, but it's not moving towards realism. The artist is using the elements of art and design to create new meaning or express something different than a likeness. So you could say that's abstract, and you would be correct, but you would defend it. You know, I would call it representational. And then style. Style, you know what style is. Each of you has a style. Style is you know, a way that a culture repeats a motif or a design that represents the culture. So you, or an artist creates a body of work that's very similar, and then it becomes it's called a style. So style is a word you would probably want to use. So then when I go to this, these are the last three. Again, you're only looking at what's highlighted in yellow to apply. So these are your elements of art. And as you can see, there's 2D definitions and 3D sometimes. One word you can use in both, other times you can't. So line in a two-dimensional work is any mark longer than it is wide. So these are linear. These drawings are linear. Whereas a line in sculpture is actually an edge, the edge of a form. So it's very different. Plane. Plane, shape in 2D, but in sculpture we call it plane, P-L-A-N-E. And that's just, you know, a form defined by its boundaries. Then you have mass. Mass is not a two-dimensional word, it is a three-dimensional word. Mass. It occupies space, like a building, architecture. Color is used in certainly both sections, both 2D and 3D. And color, very simply, is, you know, there's two types of color, reflected and refracted. And refracted is rainbow. Reflected is when an object reflects the color, it absorbs all the others, and it reflects a hue. So that's reflected color. Texture is used for both. In texture, a lot of different types of texture. Texture is the tactile quality of something, and it can be real, illusionary, or real, or used in an expressive way. All these are expressive, by the way. All these elements are expressive. So when we look at the principal design, the only one that you need to know right now is scale. Scale. And that's the relative size of something. And we'll get to that right after the case of Glasgow when you see some of the earliest sculptures. Very, very small. And there's a reason for that. And the only other thing I want you to really use in this module is a formal stance. And a formal stance is like the Egyptians use formal stance, the Greeks informal. Informal is like stiff, you're at attention if you're in the military. At ease is informal. So you want to use that because the Sumerians, actually all ancient except for India, it's very interesting, except for India, all ancient sculptures were formal. Formal stance, which were stiff. The only culture that didn't was early on India. Well, first of all, they were aniconic. We'll talk about that. There was no images, and then they became iconic, and they had images, and they were always very sensuous and informal poses. So those are the words you're going to use. That should help you. And when I start the video on that first history PowerPoint, then I will talk about these, and I will have these on the PowerPoint for you to remember to review them. Again, the ones in yellow are the ones you're using. And like I said, I would probably print that Word document that says the vocabulary to know and apply, because I think that'll be easier for you. You know, in the beginning, it's going to be a little probably cumbersome for you to use this language, but it'll become easier and easier. And then, of course, you can articulate what you're seeing. You can communicate that to others. And when you're shishiing at cocktail parties and looking at people's works of art, then you'll be able to, you know, articulate in your description. All right. See you in the next video.